This is a story called Driving Up to Kesey's Farm. I don't always remember exactly when or how things have happened, but for once I have some help. That's because I'm telling this story with the aid of Terry Ream, one-time editor of the Berkeley Barb and a fine writer who kept a journal as he went. Terry was an excellent traveling companion who in March 2016 left us for parts beyond. When I heard of his passing, it moved me to tell this story about our travels, and when I had a draft together, I wrote this to his companion. March 13th, 2016. Hi, Brenda. I've started writing a story about the trip Terry and Bobby Sky and I took up California coast to Oregon. Because memory is a slippery thing and I want to get it right, I'm wondering if Terry ever told you of a trip that involved drugs and coasting down a mountain road at night with the motor and the lights turned off. If he did, would you mind telling me what Terry told you? Because I'd trust his version more than mine for keeping the basic facts straight. What followed was a flurry of emails back and forth with his companion and his daughter. And as part of that, I received a portion of his journal. And that's a good thing, because sometimes it's hard to tell how much of what I remember is real and how much is even better. This time I get to tell you a story as I remember it, but with the immediate truth of Terry's version from 1970 right alongside. If you'll imagine this as both of us sitting together and telling the story, I think Terry would like it. So Sky and Terry Ream and I got into the van and headed up to Oregon to visit Ken Kesey at his farm. Kesey was a powerful totem for me, a mythic communal figure, and the guy who had turned me on to nitrous oxide a year earlier. That introduction, sitting in the front of the fast bus, the hog farm bus I was living on, had opened my senses to psychedelics in a way nothing else had ever done. Out of that visioned afternoon, I'd gained an altered ego and I'd taken on an alternative identity. I was Captain Gas. Sure, why not pay Ken a visit? We headed out of San Francisco in Terry's van, driving up US 1, cruising along the coastline. In his journal, Terry writes, "In Inverness, we stopped to see Elf and On. Don't get caught in any box canyon, Elf told us as we were leaving." But it did no good. Somewhere along the way, sometime in the late afternoon, we took some psychedelics. First psilocybin, and then an hour later, when we were sure it hadn't worked, some acid. Then all the drugs kicked in and the day turned sweetly cosmic. We parked on a bluff overlooking the Pacific and walked along the cliff, feeling the winds blowing, listening to the surf crashing below. Then whoosh! A big gust of wind grabbed my hat off my head. It went sailing out over the edge of the cliff and skittered down till it landed on the rocks below. Only 50 or 60 feet away, but straight down and no way to get it. Shit, damn, what a fucking disaster. That hat was totally part of me, beloved and unique, and my companion along the way. I had to get it back. So Terry writes, a few hours later up Route 1, we got out to piss at sunset by the ocean. The wind caught Andy's battered old hat and carried it about 50 feet down into what? Yep, a box canyon. "I gotta get that hat," Andy yells and starts scaling down the side. "Remember what Elf told us?" I yell back to him into the heavy wind running along the rim as Andy heads downward. "It's going to be dark soon and you're never going to find your way out." "I gotta get that hat," Andy says. "I've had it for years. That hat's been with me everywhere. I gotta get it." "You have to know when to let go," Sky yells down to him. "Let it be." "It's not time yet," Andy answers. Looking down at my hat through the acid, it seemed possible I could climb back up, but in reality, probably not. The water came right into the cliff face at the bottom and crashed on the rocks at the edge. The bluff swept away from our positions in an arc, and then the ends disappeared. The earth was soft. Pieces of it would come away in my hand, and it was steep. It was really steep. I had to have my hat, though, so I started down. Terry writes, "It's getting dark fast now. The wind is howling across the cliff. We're not going to convince him," I yelled to Sky, "so we might as well help." "Wait a minute," I yelled to Andy. "I got 100 feet of rope in the truck. I'll back it up, and we'll tie it to the bumper." And I backed the truck up, and Sky ties the rope to the bumper and lowers himself into the canyon. So this is me now. I climbed back up as Sky headed down. Then Terry and I waited on the edge above, stoned and anxious. But just a few minutes later, Sky was back up and triumphantly handed me my hat. Here's Terry writing again. "In a minute, we're back on Route 1. Had in Andy's hand, now on his head, the acid and psilocybin zooming gently through our veins. Later, that night of a new moon, we turned off the engine, the headlights, and Andy and I get atop the van, lying down and looking up at the stars. Skies at the wheel and brake, guiding us silently down the mountain road in the dark. And then this is me telling you. A few hours later, we were on a 2-lane road winding through redwood forests. Something grand was playing on the radio. Something so good that when we crested a hill and the signal dropped away, we turned back, pulled off the road, and sat there listening. In the darkness, the night was immense. The trees towering over our heads and touching the stars. Terry and I grabbed sleeping bags and spread them on the roof, and then we climbed up and lay looking into the cosmic night. Everything was alive. It was soft and beautiful. Sky got into the driver's seat, and he started the van and slowly drove it onto the road. As soon as the slope of the hill could carry us, he cut the engine, leaving gravity to coast us forward. Drifting down, it seemed the trees and the sky drifted along with us. It was all part of our journey. The breeze was part of us. We were part of it. We were part of it all. We floated down the mountain for maybe 10 minutes, the only sound the shh of our tires. No traffic, no talking, nothing but exquisite sensations. I've been a lot more loaded, but I have never been higher. Finally, the road began to level out, and when we'd slowed to a crawl, Sky pulled over, and Terry and I climbed back inside. For years, I've only had raggedy memories of all of this. Emotionally powerful, but unreal enough I didn't totally trust him. And now I had Terry's corroboration, written just 3 days after it happened. Reading his version tells me that what I remembered was true enough, and it filled my memory with newly remembered life. This thing had really happened, and it was important enough in a moment that he wrote it down, and I remembered it for over 50 years. As I get older, I think a lot about what we remember and why, about the truth there is in the moment and the truth that slowly comes from the telling. Having doubted it once, it's a pleasure for me to have this memory be trustworthy again. Because when you come down to it, memory is only an edited version of our life. What we choose to keep about who we were and what we did and when. Thank you. Thank you.